The pounding on the door came again, weaker this time, more a scrape than a knock. Ely Garrow set down his coffee and listened to the blizzard scream against the eaves of his cabin. Out here, no one knocked. Not in February. Not in the worst storm cold Antler Valley had seen in a decade. He took the rifle from above the mantel before he opened the door. The wind nearly tore it from his hand. Snow blew sideways into the room, and there, fallen across his threshold, was a woman. She had crawled. He could see the trail of it behind her, a long dragging groove in the drifts, dark in places where she had left blood. One hand still reached toward him, frozen in the act of knocking. Her lips were grey, her eye was swollen shut. Ely did not waste a breath. He slung the rifle aside and got his arms beneath her, and she weighed almost nothing, this woman, light as a sack of feed gone half empty. He carried her to the fire and laid her on the rug and shut the door against the howling dark. "Ma'am," he said, "can you hear me?" Her good eye opened a slit. It found his face and held there wary, the look of an animal that has learned what hands can do. "You're safe," he said, and the words felt strange in his mouth. He had not had cause to say them to anyone in a long time. "Nobody here but me. You're safe." He worked fast. He stripped off her soaked shawl and wrapped her in the heavy wool blanket from his own cot. He set water to heat. Her boots were thin city boots, worn through at the toe, the wrong boots entirely for this country, and her feet inside them were white as candle wax. He chafed them between his palms until the color crept back and she winced, which was good. Pain meant the flesh would live. It was when he reached for the lamp to see her face that he understood the swollen eye for what it was. Not a fall, not the cold. A fist had done that. And the split lip, and the dark bloom along her cheekbone, and the way she held her left arm tucked against her ribs as though guarding something cracked beneath. Ely Garrow had buried a wife 3 winters, Bever, nothing he could fight, and he had told himself he was done with the soft business of caring for another soul. He looked at the marks on this stranger and felt the old hardness in him shift like ice on a river in thaw. "Who did this?" he said. It was not quite a question. She did not answer. She watched him fill a cup with warm water and honey, and when he held it to her lips she drank 3 swallows before the shaking took her again. "My name's Ely," he said. "Garrow. This is my place. There's no town for 9 miles and the storm's got the road shut. You're going to stay here until you're mended, and that's the whole of it." "They'll come," she whispered. Her voice was a ruin. "He'll come." "Let him." Her name was Ruth Hadley, and it took 2 days for her to say even that much. 2 days of fever and fitful sleep, while the blizzard buried the valley to the window sills. Ely sat up both nights, feeding the fire, changing the cloth on her brow, and he learned the shape of her story from the few words she gave between chills. She had married a man named Carter Voss in St. Louis, married him on a promise of land and a fresh start in the West. The land was real enough. So was the cruelty. He drank, and when he drank he used his fists, and Ruth had learned to read the weather of him the way Ely read a sky for hail. The night she came to his door, Voss had beaten her for letting the stew go cold, and when she fell he had dragged her out into the storm by her hair and thrown her past the gate and barred the door behind her. He meant for the cold to finish what he had started. He meant for it to look like an accident. The first night was the worst of it. The fever came up high near midnight, and she fought the blankets and cried out names Ely did not know. And once she woke clawing at the air and did not know where she was, and she shrank from him so hard against the cabin wall that it near broke something in him to see it. He did not touch her then. He sat back, slow, and kept his hands where she could see them, and he spoke low and even, the way he gentled a green colt, until the wildness went out of her eyes, and she understood she was not where she had been. Then she wept, and he let her, and he did not say a foolish word about it being all right, because they both knew it had not been all right for a long time. He only kept the fire high and stayed within sight, and toward dawn she slept, truly slept, and Ely sat watching the grey come up in the window, and thought about the kind of man who could do such a thing to a woman, and the thinking put a cold weight in him that did not lift. "I walked," she said. "I don't know how far. I saw your light." 3 miles, near as I can figure, Illy said, in that wind, carrying a busted rib. I wasn't going to die in his yard. Something flickered in her then, some hard small ember that the fists had not put out. Not for him. Ellie looked at her a long moment. He had taken her for broken when he carried her in. He saw now he had been wrong, bent, maybe, bleeding, surely. But there was iron in this woman, run all the way through, and he respected iron more than near anything in the world. She mended slow, the rib first, then the eye, the swelling going down by degrees until he could see she had a steady grey gaze and a way of setting her jaw that said she had spent years deciding not to flinch. She was no great beauty by the lights of the picture papers, and she knew it, and she had clearly been told it, and told it often. But she could splint a fence rail one-handed, and she knew Herb's Ely didn't, and when his old dog tore a pad on the ice it was Ruth who poulticed it while Ely held the beast still. By the time the road opened, she had made his silent cabin into something that felt, against all his intentions, like a home. He noticed small things, the way a man does when he has stopped expecting to notice anything at all. She rose before light and had the fire built and the coffee on before he stirred, not because he asked it, but because she could not abide an idle hand. She set his table square and clean. She found his wife's old sewing basket where it had sat untouched 3 winters, gathering dust in the corner, and one evening, careful asking first with her eyes whether it would wound him, she mended the elbow of his coat that he'd let go to rags. He watched her do it by the lamp and felt something he had thought frozen clean through begin, quietly, to ache. "You don't have to earn your keep," he told her once. "I'd not turn you out into that snow if you sat idle a month." "I know it," she said, not looking up from the stitching. "I'm not earning anything. I just like a thing done right. There's not much in my life I've been let do right. This I can." She told him, over those long evenings, the things she had not said in the fever, how Carter Voss had courted her gentle as a lamb back in St. Louis, and turned the moment the wedding band was on her finger. How she'd had no people to run to, an orphan raised in a church home, and how that had been part of the appeal to a man like Voss, a wife with nowhere to go. How she had learned to make herself small, to read his moods, to keep the worsted off her by anticipating it, and how in the end none of it had mattered, because a cruel man does not need a reason. "I stopped believing I was worth saving a long while back," she said one night, plain, the way she said most hard things. A body hears it enough. She comes to take it for the truth. Ellie looked at her across the fire, this woman who had crawled 3 miles through a killing storm rather than die in a coward's yard, and he said, "Then a body heard wrong." He did not say more. He was not a man of speeches. But she looked at him a long moment, and something in her face eased, and he counted that worth more than any speech. He told himself she would go on to Oregon, to a sister she'd mentioned, soon as the passes cleared. He told himself that nightly, and believed it less each time. The thing he did not tell her was that he had ridden into town the 3rd day, soon as the wind dropped, and found out who Carter Voss was. A big man, loud at the saloon, free with his money and his temper both. Voss had told anyone who'd listen that his wife had run off in the storm, ungrateful creature, likely dead in a drift, and good riddance. He had not searched for her. He had not so much as walked his own fence line. Ely said nothing to that. He bought his flour and his shells and rode home through the white silence, and he did not tell Ruth, because telling her would mean watching the fear come back into her face, and he had grown to hate that fear more than he had words for. The peace held 11 days, and they were the best 11 days Ely Garrow had known since he'd put his wife in the cold ground. He found himself hurrying his chores to get back to the warm cabin. He found himself saving up small things through the day to tell her of an evening, a fox crossing the south pasture, the ice breaking up on the creek. He had been a long time alone, and he had told himself he liked it, and Ruth Hadley had shown him with no words at all what a lie that had been. He thought more than once of telling her what he'd learned in town. He could not bring himself to do it. Telling her would mean watching the fear come back into her face, the look of the animal that has learned what hands can do, and he had grown to hate that look worse than he hated Voss himself. So he kept his own counsel and watched the valley track and slept light, with the rifle never far. On the 12th day, the dog began to bark at mid-morning, and Ely looked out the window and saw a rider coming up the valley track, a big man on a big horse with a rifle across his saddlebow. "Ruth," he said quietly, "get in the back room, bar the door." She came to the window and looked and went the color of the snow outside. "That's him." "I know it." "Eli." Back room. He took his own rifle down and checked the load and did not raise his voice. "I gave you my word you'd not bleed again. I aim to keep it. Now go on." She went. But he heard her, behind the door, and she did not bar it. She stood ready in case he needed her, and he loved her for that too, though he had not yet let himself put the word to it. He stepped out onto the porch into the cold bright air and stood with the rifle held loose and easy in both hands, the way a man holds a tool he knows. Carter Voss reined up 20 feet off, and he was every inch the bully the town had described, broad and red-faced, with a sneer already set on his mouth. "You'd be Garrow," Voss said. "Folks tell me you took in a stray." "Folks talk too much." "That woman's my lawful wife. I've come to collect what's mine." Illy let the silence stretch. A crow called somewhere across the valley. "She's nobody's to collect," he said. "Not yours, not any man's." Voss's hand drifted toward the rifle on his saddle. "You'd stand between a man and his own wife?" "I'd stand between a man and the woman he tried to murder," Illy said. "I found her on my floor with her ribs stove in and her face beat black. 3 miles she crawled through a killing storm to get clear of you. You barred your own door on her. So don't sit there and talk to me about lawful." He one stepped down off the porch, and his voice did not rise, but it dropped, and the dropping was worse. "You touch that rifle, Voss, you'd best be quick and you'd best be sure, because I have buried one woman I loved, and I will not bury another. Most of all, I will not bury one for you." For a long moment the only sound was the horse's breathing and the snow ticking off the eaves. Voss measured him. Eli saw the moment the man's nerve was tested and the moment it broke. Because bullies are cowards under the bluster, and the cold truth in Eli's eyes was not a thing Voss had ever had to face. His hand came away from the rifle. "She's worthless," Voss spat, trying to save his pride. "Plain, barren, useless. You're welcome to her." "She's worth 10 of you," Eli said, "and you'll never be near enough to learn it. Ride off my land. If I see you in this valley again, near her or near me, the law won't be your trouble, I will. Go." Voss went. He wheeled the big horse and put his heels to it and rode back down the valley the way he'd come, and he did not look back, and Eli stood on the snow with the rifle in his hands until the rider was a black speck and then nothing at all. He heard the door open behind him. Ruth came out onto the porch, the blanket around her shoulders, and stood beside him looking down the empty track. "He won't come back," Ellie said. "His kind don't once you face them down." She was quiet a while. "Then you said you'd bury me before you'd let me bleed," to his face. "I meant it." "Why?" And there was no fear in it now, only a kind of wonder, as though she had spent her whole life being told she was worth nothing and could not quite credit a man who'd risk his life saying otherwise. Eli set the rifle against the porch rail. He turned to her, this iron woman the world had thrown out into the snow, and he found the word he had been keeping back, and he gave it to her plain, the only way he knew. "Because somewhere along these 11 days, he said, "this got to be your home too, and I to aim to let go of the one good thing the storm ever blew my way." Ruth Hadley looked up him, grey eyes steady, and for the first time since he'd carried her across his threshold she smiled, a real one, and it changed her whole plain face into something he would not have traded for any beauty in the picture papers. They went back inside out of the cold, and Ruth set the coffee to warm again as though it had been an ordinary morning, because that was her way, to put her hands to a task when her heart was full. But Eli saw them tremble at the stove, and he crossed the room and laid his own hand over hers, just that, no more, the first time he had touched her since the night he carried her in, and she went still under it. Neither of them said anything for a while. They did not need to. Some things pass between two people in a quiet kitchen better than they ever pass in words. "You don't have to stay," he said at last, 'cause he was an honest man and he would not have her feel she owed him her life as a debt. You're free of him, that's done whatever else. You can go to your sister come spring and I'll see you safe to the train myself. You owe me nothing. Ruth turned her hand over beneath his so their palms met. I know I don't have to, she said. That's the whole of why I will if you'll have me. I spent 6 years somewhere I couldn't leave. I'd like, just once, to choose where I belong. She looked up at him steady. I choose here, Ely Garrow. If that suits you. It suited him. It suited him more than anything had in 3 long winters, and for once in his life the hard, quiet man found he had no trouble at all saying so. She did not go to Oregon. The passes cleared in April and she stayed, and in May the Valley parson rode out and married them under the cottonwoods by the creek, with the old dog asleep in the sun and nobody to give her away, because she gave herself freely, which was the only way Eli had ever wanted her. She never bled again. He had sworn it in the snow with a rifle in his hands, and Ely Garrow was a man who kept his word.